BMW 4 Series Gran Coupe is, according to BMW, a car without compromise. Supposedly, they've packaged enough room for 4 and their luggage in a car with exactly the same wheelbase as the 4 Series Coupe. Apparently, they haven't compromised on looks either, as they've kept the frameless windows and sharp coupe lines. I don't know, what do you think? Well, whilst you're making up your mind, let's have a look round and a drive around to see what's what. My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. Now, of course, this is a 4 Series, but what's under the bonnet? Well, it's the ever-popular 2-litre diesel engine. With 190 horsepower and 400 Nm of torque, it's a great cruising car. But what about when you put your foot down? Let's see what she can do on the 30 to 70 sprint. .96 seconds is the time we managed, which is near enough identical to a Mercedes C220 Saloon. It's also a tad faster than a manual 420D Coupe. I think that's obviously due to the faster shifts by the gearbox. For daily driving, it's a great engine. But what about the inside? Let's have a look. The interior has never been the most flashy, but you know what? It does just work. All the controls are where you want them to be, and you never feel frustrated when you're trying to input a destination or change radio stations. What I'm interested in though is the rear. Have they really managed to create enough room for adults back here? Well, somehow they have. In fact, all they did was raise the roof by 12mm and extend it by a further 112mm. The fact I've fit back here surprises me, as the equivalent Audi A5 Sportback was definitely tighter for legroom and headroom. Amenities wise, you have your own climate and some nifty cup holders within the armrest. There is one thing no Gran Coupe or Sportback can seem to get away from though, and it's this. Why even allow people to put the windows down at this point? Move further back and you'll find a genuinely surprising boot. It's got a great amount of room for almost anything you'd need to carry, but if you do need more, you can fold the seats down and create a large flat load floor. Okay then, let's get on the road, shall we? Oh, it has been a long time since I've done a 4 Series. And to be honest, I'm kind of glad to be back in one, because they're really good cars. In fact, I did a manual 420D Coupe, and it was actually one of the best cars I've ever driven. It was just really nice to drive, and it was still fun. The last Gran Coupe I reviewed was actually the 440i Gran Coupe, and that was great to drive. But I want to see what a normal 420D Gran Coupe is like. Is it still fun? Is it still nice to drive? Does it have that effortless torque that you want from a diesel? And ultimately, do you feel like you're really missing out on something? You know, cost of living crisis, many people can't afford the car they want these days. So do you feel like you're really compromising getting one of these over the 440? Of course, the 440 is a better engine, but are you going to be annoyed that you got this instead? In terms of handling, I mean, it's exactly the same round town. Steering feels the same, throttle pedal and brake feels the same. You've still got that nice sporty but slightly comfortable suspension, and the steering gives you a lot more feel than the other German manufacturers do. Then in terms of parking, it's fairly similar to most Gran Coupes, like the Audi A5. It's kind of meh. View out the back isn't brilliant, similar to just a regular coupe really. But the view out the sides is fine really, it's no different to a 3 Series. It's just that sloping roofline that seems to get in the way a bit. But there's plenty of steering angle and the parking sensors are pretty accurate. So once you're used to it, it's alright really. Can't complain. And the thing is, a 4 Series is actually kind of the biggest car you want if you're driving around town. You don't really want anything bigger. Anyway, coming out of junctions, half throttle, Even though it's rear wheel drive, it hooks up well, deploys that 400 Newton meters of torque really nicely. And the ZF 8-speed gearbox, it's one of the best gearboxes ever made. It's so smooth. And that's one of the reasons why I love cars like this, is when you got a lot of torque and you can deploy it instantly, it means you're never having to wait for the power to come in. So whilst this car only has 190 horsepower, it can deploy it like instantly, which is what I really like. And it means you kind of relax when you're driving. You're sort of not trying to like rev the engine out wherever you go. And of course it means you save a bit of fuel as well. Talking about saving fuel, we are going to reset our trip computer and see what kind of MPG we can get on the motorway. It's going to be more than that MR2. Before we do that, let's see if this car's got enough power to kick out the rear end. Being a torquey diesel, I'm hoping it does. Right, into Sports Plus. This will sharpen up the steering, the throttle response, and will slacken off the traction, most importantly. Then I can put the ZF 8-speed gearbox into its sportier setting. This gives you faster shifts and it will hold on to gears for longer. Brakes are nice and sharp. Even though they're smaller discs, they kind of have the same initial feel as a 440i. Foot down, let's see what it does. It certainly does have enough power to kick out the back end. Even though this Gran Coupe is a little bit heavier, it still handles really well actually. And to think this is just a 420D, you know, this isn't a 440i or even a 430i, it's just your bog standard diesel. This is the pick if you want to save money, and it's still pretty good fun. Anyway, let's go into Eco Pro and see if we can get a good MPG figure. I believe it's supposed to do 61 miles per gallon on the motorway. I don't think we're going to do that, but hopefully we can get close to that figure. On the motorway then, and this is where you're going to spend most of your time if you're driving a diesel car. So what's this BMW like? Well, there's a little bit more road and wind noise than there is in the Audi A5 Sportback. But, I mean, it's so marginal that it really doesn't matter. You know, I'm noticing it a little bit more around here and a little bit more road noise, but that's because we're riding on, I think they're 20-inch CS wheels. They're like replica BMW M4 CS wheels, which do look very nice, but they do add just a tiny bit more road noise, which, you know, don't really want. Then in terms of visibility, it's actually pretty good on the motorway. Of course the view out the rear isn't amazing when you're parking, but when you're on the motorway it's fine. You can see everything you need to see. You've got nice big wing mirrors as well. And just generally it's not a hard car to see out of. But one thing I love is just the way it drives on the motorway. Now you'd think a good handling car is going to drive pretty much the same as every other car on the motorway, but it's little things like feedback through the steering and suspension that just, it gives you more confidence and it makes you feel like you're more in control of the car, even when you're just going in a straight line. And in turn that actually relaxes you. Plus the gearbox and engine respond really nicely. Like we're in Eco Pro, half throttle, and you just go from 60 to 70 just like that. It's an amazing cruiser this, and it's set up to be one as well. Then in terms of quality, this is actually a really well built car. BMWs of old have been known to be a little bit rattly in the interior department. Thankfully these ones are alright. Ever since about 2014 they started making really well built cars. Even the latest G series is really well made, I have to say. You get squidgy materials on the door cards and the dash, and everything's just well put together so you don't get any of those aforementioned rattles. Then in terms of wear and tear, the only thing BMWs suffer from a little bit is the steering wheel wear, and that is because I don't think the finish is quite as high quality as it should be. I have noticed in cars that are only like 4 or 5 years old, they start to lose the finish and then they're basically down to bare leather. So a lot of people do end up getting them retrimmed. So if you do buy one of these, just make sure you look after the leather on the steering wheel a bit. Leather on the seats though is totally fine. They seem to be pretty hard wearing actually. Then in terms of optional extras, if I only had 3 choices, what would I get? Well, the first thing is going to be the Pro Nav screen. It gives you more real estate, looks nicer, and is just generally more useful. Next thing is going to be heated seats, because if you've got leather seats and you live in the UK, it's going to get cold during winter, and it's one of those things you just want to have. It's a nice to have, basically. Then the last thing is just going to be the Harman Kardon sound system. Being a Gran Coupe, if you go for a panoramic roof, it doesn't really do much. You know, you can have a little bit more light. And if you've got a 440i, maybe you use it to get some more exhaust noise, but it's not really worth it in my mind, unless you've got a 3 Series estate where you get the full panoramic glass roof that extends pretty much all the way to the boot. But anyway, why am I choosing the Harman Kardon sound system? Of course, mainly it's because the sound is a lot nicer. The standard system is fine if you're just listening to like DAB radio songs and stuff like that. But if you want to like connect your phone up to Apple CarPlay or Bluetooth audio, Harman Kardon system adds a really nice depth of bass and, most importantly, clarity to the sound. That's what the standard system is lacking. It's loud, but it doesn't have the clarity, whereas the Harman Kardon system is louder and has quite a lot more clarity, and you get a really nice big oomph from the subwoofer at the boot. And secondly, it adds a really nice little speaker grill onto the door, and without it you just get this really cheap plastic. So yeah, I mean, it's really worth it actually. It just adds a little bit more design into the interior, which is nice, I think. Right, we've got a couple more miles to do on the motorway. Currently sitting at 48.7 miles per gallon, which is not bad. Is it 60 though? No. Let's do a couple more miles and see if we can hit that figure. Well, that's our motorway stint over. And we had a pretty much clear run today, so we did manage to get 54.7 miles per gallon, which is still going up. So yeah, I mean, maybe you could get 61 out of this thing if you were driving really efficiently. You know, we're talking 60 miles an hour for a good while on the motorway. But it's certainly doable, and I think for a cruiser, I mean, it's a brilliant engine. It's got loads of torque. If you want to overtake people and drive quicker than 70, then you can. So yeah, for a motorway cruiser, it's a great car. How does it handle though? It's a BMW, it should be fun, even though this is a 420D Gran Coupe. It should still put a smile on my face. Let's find out. Right, back into Sports Plus in manual. Let's see how this thing handles. It's typical BMW. You basically put your foot down and it does what you want. There's a little bit of traffic today, so I can't really exploit it too much. Look how fast the gear changes are though. For a torque converter, this ZF is amazing. I mean, it's basically the same as a dual clutch. I'm asking for a gear and it's just giving it to me straight away. Brakes are nice and sharp. The only time you notice that they're slightly lacking in power compared to the M Sport system brakes is when you're really going into them. One thing I love about BMWs is just their steering feel. It just means you know exactly what the car's doing. But put your foot down, coming around a corner, and it will go sideways, even in the dry. And again, it's a 420D, not a 440i, not a 430D. It is a great chassis, this. You know, usually you'd think something with the name Gran Coupe wouldn't be exuding feel or necessarily be fun to drive. But this 420D does give you the best of both worlds, really. You know, you're getting an efficient engine that's going to save you money. It's still fun, really. put it in perspective, the 440i is like this to drive, but with more power and a nice exhaust note. That's all you're missing out on, really. The steering, suspension, everything feels the same. And the thing is, with this diesel, the response is almost just as good. You've got 100 Newton meters less torque, but being a diesel, you just plant your foot, and even in 5th gear, you can see it picks up really nicely. Right, down a tighter B road. This is where BMWs are really good. Fast, you get up to 60 as well. Hard on the brakes. Stay in 3rd because there's loads of torque. Foot down, and it just rotates. That's the feeling you're looking for. Positive steering and a rotating rear end. This is definitely the most fun regular car you can get, I think, out of the German manufacturers. Audi are very good at long distances. Mercedes are good at, I don't know, being flashy. But BMWs, they just have this really nice driving experience. And I think everyone should try and at least own one BMW in their life. Because once you get one, I don't know if you'll go back or not. The way they drive is just really nice. The fact a standard 420D can allow me to have a laugh is great, really. You know, I'm not spending big money and I'm still having fun. See, this is the thing I love about BMWs. No matter what car you buy from them, you can always have some fun in it. I think this Gran Coupe really is great though. Being on exactly the same wheelbase as the regular coupe really helps, I think, especially when it comes to the handling. It feels just as darty and barely any more cumbersome in the corners. So, you get economy, a fun drive, a genuinely practical car, and coupe looks all in one neat little package. That's a cracking deal in my mind. As always, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, give it a like and why not subscribe. As not only can you see more content like this, you can see everything we have for sale, which as usual includes this lovely car in the video. My name's Tom, and you've been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.